How old's your kiddo? Or kiddo? 6th grade. Okay. I've got a 5th grade girl, and 2 2nd grade boys. And I'm so interested in this one. And not that I don't feel like you don't have a problem with it. I don't think. I don't think issues. Anything we have a hard time finishing the screen time. They really want it. I mean, I'm like, you guys got stuff to do, you know, I mean, yeah. Oh, yesterday it was perfect. Yeah, they were playing my the weekend. I just want to remind
Don't want to move the mic because it's from Morgan. So we're going to add Morgan to the mix.
Good morning, Upper School. Today's Tuesday, March 18th, and it's a blue 2. Here's today's Trickster Tuesday. Hey, Lily, what did one hat say to the other? I don't know. You wait here. I'll go on ahead. A reminder that there will not be a morning meeting today. If you have signed up for the blood drive, remember to head over to the auditorium a little before your scheduled donation time. Looking on down the line, Pizza Bingo is this Friday. If you have younger siblings, it's a fun event to take your family to. Also, is this weekend. It's a tournament of a lifetime, so get your team together and keep it cool. Finally, a very happy birthday to Harris Fleischman. That's all for me, folks. This is Lily.
Wow. You almost got to like listen to the podcast. Prepare yourself for it. Find that stuff out there.
Le temps de l'absence, même si je dois partir, pour un peu mieux grandir, laissez-moi t'offrir un peu de chemin. Le chant d'olivier, le parfum de casa. Je porte avec moi, partout où je vais, la chaleur du sourire, les gens de la base, je pense sur le sable, les yeux sur le voile, l'odeur de la casa. On a tous une histoire qui commence quelque part. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. On a tous une histoire qui commence quelque part. Dans ces rues, je me reconnais bien. Le soleil s'est éteint, une nouvelle vie commence. Tu serais qui était le mien, monter les plus beaux chemins, celui de l'espérance. Même si je dois partir, pour un peu mieux grandir, laissez-moi t'offrir un peu de chez moi. Le chant d'olivier, le ranimer, le parfum de casa. Je porte avec moi, partout où je vais, la chaleur du sourire, les gens de là-bas, les vents sur le sable, les yeux sur le voile, l'odeur de la casa. On a tous une histoire qui commence quelque part. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. La 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 lay lay la lay lay la lay. On a tous une histoire qui commence quelque part.
Welcome everybody, thank you for coming. We're going to be speaking on the podium here, so if you want to turn your chairs around, now is the time to do it. It's so exciting to see this group growing and growing. Please remember to tell two friends about what you learned in this session and an even larger group next time. I'd like to thank Jim and Sharon for the great work that they're doing this year, so let's give them a round of applause. It was about this time last year that I was reading Anxious Generation and thinking about we need to get phones off of this campus. And then we announced it right towards the end of the year. And I remember two sophomores came into my office really eloquent with their argument about why we should still have phones and they're good students and they can do fine with phones. I was like, let me think about it, no. Like I thought about it for maybe a second and a half. And so I think it's one of the best things we've done is to really separate ourselves from phones. And I've talked to the two girls that came, a little teasing, a little ribbing, but they admit that it has improved their lives significantly. And so what we're going to explore today is 2.0, right? Like, what is it that we should be doing? Because I still have a pretty weird relationship with this thing, right? What do we need to do to think about what our relationship is with phones and well-being and connectivity with each other and our community? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I would like to take a moment to settle in. So just take a deep breath in. let out all your worries. Have a deep breath in. Think about something you're thankful for, you're grateful for. How blessed are we to be in community here today? Thank you. Now Sharon's going to do an official introduction. Let's give Sharon Kinnison a round of applause.
We have a screen time consultant here today, and I'm excited. This is a brainchild of Jim McGuire. It's been in the making for a while, but she brings a wealth of good information, solid information, based upon a lifetime of research and education and experience, not only experience in this prominent issue, but in the classroom. And moreover, she's going to bring insights that are indicative from our community based upon a survey that you took a few weeks back. So we're excited to have her here today. We'll do a book signing at the end. We're going to give away 2 books over there, and if you want to be a part of the mailing list for the Screen Time Consultant, there's a sheet to sign up. Give a warm welcome to Emily Church.
Thank you for having me. Is the volume good? I'm usually really loud, so I'll try not to be too impactful. What a great way to start the morning. What a great turnout. I'm here from Seattle, so it's very early over there. So I'm glad to be here and starting my day this way. And that was, thank you for the introduction and for having me at Collegiate, because I heard a lot about the school. I really appreciate the survey that you all took. A lot of really great information, and I'll have a whole summary for your staff when we're done. But I want to always start with this, which is that these are my children. And I start with this because I want you to know you're not alone. That parenting in the digital age is like parenting never before. And my kids are now almost 17 and almost 14. And I made plenty of mistakes in their childhood. And they still have access to use screens, and we still argue about it in my house. So what I'm here to do today is to talk about, not about how to not do it, but what we can do and how we can support our families, given that our kids have access and that there's technology is part of our life now. And I love that Collegiate has gone phone free. This is a movement that's been taking roots in lots of places around the country. I'm increasingly hearing from schools that are interested in doing this, so bravo to you. And I will say it front, and I'll say it again later, but the feedback in the survey was overwhelmingly positive from parents about this change. So great for you for supporting your school in this change as well. So very briefly about me, as I said, I'm a mom. I'm a former middle school teacher. I used to joke that parenting was the hardest job I ever had, but I also taught 7th grade, so I don't know, it's a toss-up. I love middle schoolers. I was a teacher for 12 years, and then I sort of pivoted and did some, worked in a center for ADHD, and one of those things about being at the center was realizing that screens was really entering into the classroom setting in a new way and was impacting the students' experiences of learning. And I wrote a book, which is called The Screen Time Solution, a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech-intentional family. I do a lot of public speaking and traveling, and I've been in several different cool places over the last several months. And then I do a lot of advocacy work around school technology and trying to get to a more tech-intentional place. And I will explain what I mean by tech-intentional soon. And by the end of today, you'll know what I mean by movement builder, because I will invite you to join me. So I always start my presentations with this quote, replace judgment with curiosity. And I first heard this when I was, before I had children. I was recently married. My husband and I took a mindfulness class. And I joke it was at the time before we had children when we had time to take a mindfulness class. But the teacher said this, and it stuck with me because I realized so much of life is judgy. And I felt like I could be judgy, and I was judgy, and felt judged. And then I had kids, and it was even more judgy about how you raise your children. And it was exhausting. And so realizing that I could replace judgment with curiosity and start there was a kind of refreshing idea. So I went and I had it engraved on a keychain, and I brought it home, and I was going to give it to my husband. And my cousin was over, and she looked at it, and she goes, Emily, you spelled judgment and curiosity wrong. I was a literal 7th grade English teacher at the time, and I was so embarrassed. And I realized it was 100% my fault because I had proved what the engraver had said, or had written. And I took a moment to replace judgment with curiosity about how hard those words seemed to apparently to be to spell. These are the correct spelling, just so we're clear. So I start with that because I want you to know that in this, I am in this with you too, and I still make mistakes, and the hope tonight is that this morning, is that you feel empowered with some new ideas about how to go through this parenting in the digital age. So I talk a lot about tech intentionality. I always say I'm not anti-tech, I'm tech intentional. And to me, that means using screen-based tech that enhances, nurtures, supports ourselves, our children, and our families in a way that aligns with our values, while we also resist, delay, and limit screen use that interferes with healthy development, all of the different kinds of development. And that's really a mouthful, so I like to give you also a TLDR, which is too long, didn't read, and my dog is reading a book. And this is the TLDR, less is more, later is better, relationships and skills before screens. So to me, that's what it means to be tech intentional. And if you take nothing away today, it's to just start to think about how you approach technology with these sort of three concepts in mind. So, the big picture. Let's start with the numbers. And again, I'm going to give you the numbers, and then we're going to talk about why we can handle this. And I'm here to have you invite you to replace judgment with curiosity and not panic. And remember the deep breath you took at the start, because we all can do this and get through this, and it will be okay. So this is only about like a minuscule amount of all of the things that have happened in the last 10, 15 years. But in 2012, selfie is when selfie entered our vocabulary. It's also when we noticed this connection to teen mental health. If you read Jonathan Haidt's book, he documents that very well. I actually wrote about him in my book, so you can read about Jonathan Haidt's work in my book too. In 2016, 77% of US households had a smartphone, which is just crazy to me that a decade ago, there was still 25% of households without it, right? It's just not fathomable in my mind now. Machine learning algorithms started. We all know what happened in 2020. In 2021, Frances Haugen and the Facebook whistleblowing issue came up, really acknowledging publicly for the first time that Facebook was putting profits before people. Teens and tweens are spending between 5 and 8 hours online per day. And a couple years later, 1 in 5 teens YouTube, TikTok almost constantly. The US Surgeon General is warning about 13 being too young. And of course, I put 2025 on here, and we're already a quarter of the way into that. Phone free school movement, conversations about ed tech, and then AI, which is just something we cannot not talk about. Okay. When we talk about screen use at school, I want to highlight there are two very distinct challenges to this. One is the student personal devices like smartphones and smartwatches, and two is the school-issued technology that comes often in the forms of one-to-one, digital learning tools, learning management systems, online curricula, on internet-connected tablets and laptops. And when we talk about screens in schools, it can get really murky about what we're talking about. So kudos again to Collegiate for having a phone-free policy. That is 100% the right direction, and I see so many schools heading that way. I think there are still challenges that exist, not only at Collegiate, but across the country with the ed tech challenge. Let's talk about personal tech though first, because this is the most current data, and I find this pretty fascinating. According to Common Sense Media, which they do a research report every year, 40% of 2-year-olds currently have their own personal tablet. And again, I mentioned my children are much older. We didn't even have a family tablet when they were 2 years, and that was like 12 years ago. So just in such a short period of time, we've seen sort of the family tablet became, each kid got their own tablet, became each toddler got their own tablet, to rubber casing that you put on the toddler's tablet, right? Like very much not how an iPod was initially designed. According to the Collegiate data, and I'm going to put in pink is the data from the survey that I got, and I realize this is a very widespread because it's pre-K to 12, but 69% of personal tablets, which doesn't surprise me, and if we graphed it, it would look what you would expect, right? Kind of, actually it would drop off at the older age because 51% of collegiate students have smartphones. Again, that's a wide range, but we know that the average US statistic is 71% for 12-year-olds. But I also like to point out that 30% of 8-year-olds is a pretty significant number. We're talking about a third of 8-year-olds with their own personal phone. This is not access to a parent phone, this is personal. And of course, Center for Disease Control found last year that 7.5 hours per day on average, is the amount of total screen time for 8 to 18-year-olds, and that does not include any time spent on screens at school. So you can do the math in a 24-hour day minus 75 hours, not that much, 7.5 hours, that's not a lot of hours left. And I don't know if it's this next slide, but we'll explain that a little bit more in a second. So according to the collegiate survey data, 61% of parents say screen time is the #1 conflict in our family right now. Sliver of a good note here, that number has gone down over my surveys the last couple of years, so yay, maybe. I don't know what the other stressor is, but that one's gone down. 78% of parents do say, though, that the amount of time we spend on screens is more than we'd like or way too much. That number consistently is high. So again, you're not alone. And according to the data, again, we have about half of students spending between 1 and 3 hours per day on screens, and this is for the at-home screen use, not related to school. So well below that average that I showed you, but it's worth noting that 20% of parents reported kids spending 3 or more hours. Now, one of the things to remember too is in a self-report, it's always hard to know, like parents are estimating, we may not always see what our kids are doing. Does this count the time that they're looking at their friend's phone when their friend's over at the house, right? So sometimes those are things that are hard to track. We also know that children are on social media. So the share of teens who say they're online almost constantly today, which is 46% of teenagers, has doubled in 10 years. 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds are on social media, 70% of kids are visiting YouTube daily, and 95% at least of teens are on social media. About 95% of American teens have phones at this point as well. I want to talk about YouTube really briefly because I think this one gets a pass in a way that I don't actually like, because YouTube is a social media platform. We don't think of it that way because it's not sort of in our brain as that, but in the way that it operates and the way that it attracts users and engages users, it's a social media platform. So parents will always say, well, what about YouTube Kids? And here's my comparison between YouTube and YouTube Kids. YouTube is like dropping your kids off at the sketchiest bar in the sketchiest part of town and saying, have fun, be safe. And YouTube Kids is like dropping them off at the 18 and up dance club and saying, have fun, be safe. It is not an improvement by most stretches. So I just put out there because I think YouTube is one of those things where there's some great stuff on there and there's some really not great stuff, and it is still algorithmically driven and designed to keep your attention and hook and hold you there. So just be on top of YouTube is a word to the wise here. We also know that children are gaming. I want to say, I want to ask, does anybody thought Roblox was roadblocks until this moment? It's okay if you did, I won't judge you. Remember, I'm not here to judge. Roblox has over 34 million daily active users under the age of 13. That's their own number, they report that. But the law says you have to be 13 or older to use these platforms. So they know that minors are using it. Not all children are impacted the same by gaming, right? You can have twins, identical twins. One has a complete meltdown, one is completely fine after it. School computers are frequently used for gaming at school. I've been to many a school standing in the back of the classroom, and the kids are so fast at toggling between those windows. Children cite socialization as a reason that they game, but they also say it disrupts their sleep, which, surprise, surprise, that it does. About 85% of teens play video games, 40% play daily. Again, when you saw that picture of my son, he's almost 17, he does play video games. It took me a long time to get to a point where I was like, I'm going to have to fit this into my value system and keep teaching and educating him. But I always joke my kids have the screen time consultant as their mom, and so we talk about screen time all the time. If I were a dentist, they would floss more. So, according to your survey here, 86% of parents do report seeing behavioral and mood changes at least sometimes after your child games or uses a screen, like for social media. And this isn't a surprise because we know that the products are designed to hook and hold attention, and when children's attention is interrupted, it doesn't feel good and they react. So it's actually very developmentally appropriate that they're having these responses, but guess who it makes it a lot harder for? You guys. So we also know that the harms are real. 50% of US teens have experienced online bullying. This is from Common Sense, maybe. No, Pew Research. 3 hours a day on social media doubles the risk of poor mental health. All of this is in Jonathan Haidt's book. We've seen a 134% increase in anxiety, a 100% increase in depression in the last 15 years. And then according to your survey, 1 in 10 collegiate students or parents report that 1 in 10 students have been bullied online. And YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Roblox were the most popular apps cited by parents used by students. That's not a surprise to me because those are the most popular apps, but they're different in different ways. They're problematic in different ways. And so I just, again, encourage parents to be aware of what your children are doing. We'll talk a little bit more about what parents can do and how we need to know about that. Roblox is especially popular with sort of the, I don't know, under 6th grade set, I would say, and it's not one game. This is a really important thing to know. If you thought it was Roblox, it's not, it's Roblox. And if you think it's one game, it's not. It's like thousands or if not hundreds of thousands of games. And there might be a few in there that are fine, and there are lots that are not, and there's lots of pop-up ads, and it's where people know where children are playing, and so not so great people also spend time in those games. So especially for the chatting part of those, just shut all that off as much as you can. Okay, so why is it so hard to fix? I've definitely been hinting at this a little bit, but I like to sort of give this story about the tween years because I taught 7th grade. I vividly remember 7th grade. I'm probably dating myself a little, and I'm also stretching because I technically was a tween in 89 to 91, but here, let's just say it's the 90s. These were the things that are on your mind in your tween years, right? Like fitting in and cliques and what do you wear and, you know, telling your parents you're the worst parents. And I did put baggy denim on there because boy denim keeps coming back in all kinds of shapes. Everyone else has an Esprit bag and I don't have an Esprit bag, right? This is what I remember. Well, lo and behold, let's go to the 2020s. What is middle school like for middle schoolers today? Very much the same thing, FOMO. I want to be away from my parents. They're the worst parents in the world. I want to, you know, be with these friends and they don't like these friends. And everything's awkward and puberty and baggy denim, notice, has made a comeback. But there is one significant difference. The experience in middle school from a middle school developmental childhood adolescence experience hasn't changed. But one thing really, really has, and it is this. I am so grateful that our middle school days did not include social media, smartwatches, because it has fundamentally changed the experience of middle school. So, you know, you used to be embarrassed in middle school back in my day, and you'd go home and you could tell like one person, and if you had a party line, maybe you could call 2 people, right? Now what happens, somebody videos it, takes a picture, uploads it to an Instagram or something, and it is hundreds or thousands of people see it instantaneously. So this actually, again, another reason it is so great to have banned phones at school is because a lot of times phones are used to stir up drama and increase social violence and aggression and behavioral issues at school because of things that happen online, trickling into the day. So, this is a slide I was excited to show you. So this is Dr. Doug Gentile's research, and he studies displacement. And he looked at the week in the life of an average American school-age child. In the 1950s, and this has not changed. We always have 168 hours in the week. That number has stayed the same. But if you look at how that time has been distributed over the generations, I find this very fascinating. Obviously, we should be sleeping at least 7 hours a night. Many teens are not getting enough of that. Personal care and school, those are sort of steady numbers. But what you notice has changed dramatically over the last several decades is that open free play or free time. So in the 50s, you know, we're looking at 68 hours a week of a lot of free time after school, a lot of wandering and doing music and sports and hanging out with friends and doing homework and all of that. And yes, today in our modern world, we are very structured. Our kids have activities and appointments and lessons, and we do a lot of that. But starting around the 80s and 90s, we had the introduction of television becoming much more embedded in our family lives, obviously computers and video games, and his research stops at 2010, which crazily enough is 15 years ago at this point. But we can fill in the blank with what comes next, because even back in 2010, I don't have a little red thing here, that number dropped to 14 hours a week, which is 2 hours a day. I mean, that's not a lot of time. And again, if you go back to that 7.5 hours a day on screens, no wonder that number is gotten lower. So his research talks about displacement, the idea that the time we spend on screens is time we're not spent doing something else. This is true for us as adults. We could probably all think of ways we've displaced other activities in favor of watching or scrolling or doing something on a screen. And we'll talk about why that's different right now. Because The reason that our screens are so compelling is because of something called persuasive design, which is really just the use of technology plus psychology to change our behavior. So it could be something like, I have an app that's gonna track my calories and help me eat healthy, and it's gonna, show me, and it's gonna, because of what I enter, it will tell me to do this. And we might think that that's a good thing, and we're adults. The problem when it comes to the products that our children are using is that they are designed to hold us on and keep our attention focused on that product. So the reason that there is no bottom to your social media feed, to Instagram, that you can literally scroll forever and never reach the end, is by design. If you've ever been ready to go to bed and you're like, I'll just watch one more episode. Do you remember when it used to say play next episode and you had to manually click the button? What happens now? It auto plays, right? That is an intentional design choice that means you have to do even less work, so decreasing that friction to stop your behavior, to let that screen just continue to play. The problem is, your kid is not weak-willed because she can't get off her phone. Your kid's brain is being engineered to get her to stay on her phone. And this is known now, that developmental psychologists are hired by Silicon Valley and tech developers to make their products as compelling as possible. Because time on device is how you make money. And again, I will, full disclosure, my husband works in the tech industry, so I am married to the problem. And we talk about it all the time. So I appreciate that he can support our family and support, what we do, and I am definitely asking him a lot of questions constantly. But he helps me understand this as well, because this is the business model. The problem with this business model in combination with persuasive design is children's brains, because children's brains are not adult brains. They don't operate the same way, they don't learn the same way, and they're not fully developed. And the reason this is so important is because screen use or excessive screen use can interfere with healthy brain development. We are seeing emerging evidence, especially among really young children, that excessive screen use is actually impacting brain development at this point. And we don't have long-term data to know what the fallout from that's going to be, because this is really a 5-10-year-old problem in terms of how much children are on screens. So when we talk about executive function, so if there are brain scientists in here, please forgive this very crude explanation of this. But in your brain, you have something in the front of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of your brain to fully develop. Your brain develops from your back to your front. And in your prefrontal cortex is where you build skills called executive function. So planning, prioritizing, organization, time management. If you have ever had a child with a gift of ADHD, you are very familiar with the underdevelopment of executive function. If you have a 7th grader, you probably are very familiar with the irregularity of executive function, where one day they are totally on top of it and the next day they can't find their shoes. So again, executive function are all these skills that we need to function as adults and to function as humans in the real world. And they are developing throughout childhood. And because this is the last part of our brain to fully develop, it doesn't fully reach full maturity until we're in our 20s or even 30 years old, which is crazy to me when you think about the extension of childhood from the brain development standpoint. It also makes sense why college kids often do really stupid things, because if you think about it, we look at them as adults, but they're only halfway through their prefrontal cortex developed, maybe a little more than halfway, right? So we have to look at children and their reaction to screen time in the context of this brain development situation. Their brains, they lack the ability to self-regulate. And I hear this all the time. My kid needs the screen, my kid's screens help them regulate. That's not actually possible from the brain development definition. That screens are dysregulating and the children lack the developmental ability to regulate using screens. They might seem calm, but that's not the same thing as regulation. And why is that? Because of the dopamine feedback loop. So what's happening is when we spend time in an app or a game, we perform an action, whatever you do in an app or a game, you wait for a reaction and you get the reward, which is the dopamine hit. And dopamine is a feel-good hormone, right? We like dopamine. We usually associate dopamine with happiness and joy and yay. The problem is that persuasive design exploits this. It is designed to flood your brain with dopamine. It is designed to hijack your neural pathways and get that dopamine flowing. But the problem is, it's amazing, our brains adapt. So if you've spent 10 minutes playing a game to get that dopamine hit, next time you play, you have to spend 12 minutes to play to get that same dopamine hit. And the next time it has to be 15 minutes. So if you've noticed your kid getting super into something, but it's harder and harder and harder to get them off of it, this is why. So what I say to parents, oops, not yet, is it is not you versus your child, it is you versus a hijacked neural pathway. You will never be better than the dopamine. You could be doing everything right as a parent, but you cannot compete with the dopamine. So, again, when you're fighting with your kids about this, I mean arguing politely, because that's how it goes, right? Just remember it's the dopamine, it's not your kid. And I cannot stress this enough because this is coming up now in the Common Sense Media report, for example. Short form content is on the rise. And when we talk about short form content, we're talking TikTok, we're talking YouTube Shorts, and we're talking Instagram Reels, where you can literally just, bottom scroll. I call these dopamine snacks because they are just hit after hit of little dopamine bursts. So we'll talk about what you can do about that, but I think it's really important. I've been hearing from things like theater companies who are picking shorter plays because the attention span of adults has gotten shorter, that they don't want to sit through a 3-hour play, so they're picking shorter things. So, question. My son just got his driver's license. How many of you, is it 16 driving age in Kentucky? Okay. So assuming things go as planned, how many of you intend to let your 16-year-old or have let your 16-year-old take driver's ed and get a driver's license? Okay. How many of you, let's say there was no law, let's say it was 14 was the driver's age. Would anybody say, I have a responsible 14-year-old, I could see them driving? Usually I get a hand or two. No, interesting, 14-year-old. How about a 12-year-old? Okay, you see where I'm going with this. We do not let 11 and 12-year-olds and even 14-year-olds drive the car, and it's not just because they're too short. It is because of their brains. They lack the brain development, that executive function to make really important decisions, and one could argue we should probably not let 16-year-olds be driving either from a brain development standpoint, but there is a reason we don't hand car keys to children. It's the same thing we need to think about with phones, because we're essentially handing car keys to children. There are only 2 industries that refer to their customers as users: illegal drugs and software. As I keep saying, this is not a fair fight. It's not you versus your child, it's you versus the hijacked neural pathway. Brains haven't changed, technology has, childhood hasn't changed. Children are the same, childhood has changed. And actually, I see a little star by brains haven't changed. That's changing. So I may have to change the slide. So here's what really matters. And I wrote this slide kind of when my daughter was in her Taylor Swift era. So if you have a Swiftie in your house, it's, hi, it's me, it's us, we're the solution, it's us, it's a Taylor Swift reference. So this is what you told me. These are direct quotes from the survey. Well, okay, I paraphrased some of them slightly, edited for clarity. But the older my child gets, the more challenging this becomes. We could be doing everything right, and it is still exhausting. I hear this so much. Oops, sorry. There's a deep fear of FOMO that leads to breaking our rules. FOMO is fear of missing out, very developmentally appropriate for that tween set. As parents, I know we have a lot of work to do in terms of our own screen use. Remember, you're not alone, that's me yelling at my kids, get off their devices. But you're right, our screen use as parents really does matter. This is national data. 76% of parents around the country, it's really close to collegiate data. 2 in 3 admit feeling distracted by our devices when we're with our kids. And 66% of parents believe parenting today is harder than it was for previous generations. I always tell this anecdote. I talked to a mom who had 10 children. She was calling me because her 10th had a phone. And she said, I've raised 9 children. I have never experienced what I am experiencing today with this child and her phone. And I thought that was a very good anecdote. You guys also agreed. As a parent, I feel icky after I've been online too long. Bigger family issue is our phones and getting distracted by them. Our child notices how much time we're on our screens and points it out. I have a good strategy for that in a minute. We use it more than we would like to admit, so thank you for admitting that. I, like many parents, wish I modeled better phone behavior. This is just a handful of the quotes. There was a lot of that. Because here's the reality. 95% of collegiate parents admit to keeping their phones in their room at night, but if we do this, it's a lot harder to say no to that. So if you go away today with no other strategies, which I hope isn't true, because I'll get there in a minute, but get your phone out of your bedroom. Because if you're scrolling before bed, A, we know it's disrupting your sleep. TikTok before bed messes with your head, is the adage I like to think about. But it's also modeling for your kids that it's okay to have your phone in your room before bed. And if your kids are really little right now, you can do this and change it, they may never remember. Because if you have teenagers and their phones are in their room at night and you wish they weren't, but yours are, it's a lot harder to make that argument. If it's just not in your bedroom, it's just the way we've always done things in this house. And it's also never too late to go back and say, I made a mistake. We need to rethink this. We're all moving our phones out. And I know no one has a landline anymore, so what about emergencies? Keep your phone on, put it in the hallway outside your bedroom on full volume, you'll still hear it, right? Okay, again, do you hear, I got a message here, keep beating this drum. So let's talk about what tech-intentional families do, because I don't want to just present you with the scary stuff and not actually some strategies for how you can handle it. So tech-intentional families ask the right questions. And here's what I mean by that, because I always get asked these two questions. How much screen time is too much screen time, and what parental controls do you recommend? And here's why I don't want you to ask these questions. Because TikToking for 6 hours is very different than FaceTiming with grandma, right? So when we say screen time, I recognize that that can mean a whole lot of different things, and if I just give you a number, I don't know, what are we talking about? Are we talking about TikTok or FaceTime, right? So don't look so much at total number. And the second problem with parental controls, and I'm going to say this as a caveat, if you have them and they work for you, great. Too often, parents ask me this question because they hope there's an app that they can download that will just prevent all of these problems and save everything. And I'm here to tell you that doesn't exist, or I wouldn't be asked that question all the time. Also, your kids are way savvier, they find the workarounds, and parental controls are what I call digital whack-a-mole. Like, you just think you've blocked one thing and something else pops up. And it is much more convenient for technology companies to put the onus on you to fix this rather than take any responsibility or change the manipulative nature of their apps in the first place. So that's not your fault, but it is our responsibility to address it. So here are the questions I'd rather you ask. Do I know what my child is doing online, and do I have a strong relationship with my child? And those are related questions. And you might be thinking, but Emily, wouldn't parental controls tell me what my child is doing online? I mean, it might be a tool, but it does not displace you as the mentor of your child, as the teacher of what they need to know. So focusing on these, that is going back to roadblocks. If you thought it was roadblocks, that is not knowing what your child is doing online. If they're watching YouTube, what are they watching on YouTube? I'm going to give you some strategies about how you can do this, because I don't want you to just jump in there and yell at them about, I can't believe you're watching that on YouTube. The way we're going to do this is by living our lives out loud. Living your life out loud means narrating what you do as you do it anytime it comes to digital text. So I'm reaching for my phone, I'm checking what time soccer practice starts, I'm picking up the carpool, I'm texting the carpool parents, now I'm checking the traffic to see if I need to blah, 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 blah. Play by play, boring, all the time, every time you pick up your phone. And I am talking adult behavior here. I am not talking about your kids doing this. You know this is working if you have a tween in the house and they roll their eyes at you for doing this, because it means they're listening. So look, we're going for the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, we're parenting in the values we have, we're doing the things we want. We are gonna mess up, and that's good parent role modeling too, because we all make mistakes. But if you can start living your life out loud, and usually it's not happening now, in my audiences there's like one couple and somebody's elbowing the other person really hard at this moment. So if there's a person in your house who uses their phone more than you would like, and living your life out loud is an opportunity for both of you to start doing that together as adults to model it. And there's several benefits to living your life out loud. One is the accountability, right? I'm acknowledging, I'm picking this up even if maybe I don't want or need to. Second, it is, our kids see the back of our phone. They have no idea what we're doing. We literally could be playing Candy Crush or whatever, and we could also be writing a legal brief. They have no idea. So by narrating it, we give them some context. I always say that smartphones are Swiss Army knives, not switchblades. They're multi-tools, right? So helping our kids understand that. We can also layer in the emotional vocabulary. We can start to say things like, oh gosh, I'm bored and I'm standing in line at a coffee shop and I'm looking at Instagram and I do not feel better. Now I just feel like, oh, I need to get my house all in, whatever. I don't know, just that constant stream of consciousness about how it makes us feel helps kids see they're not alone in this experience. So that is living your life out loud. It's free. I usually tell parents, don't go home and change everything tonight or today. This one you can start today. And my husband, we do this at our house, and my husband said he went to work and he started noticing, again, tech company, no one is doing it, right? Because you do look crazy. But it made him realize how no one is doing it and how helpful it would be if we could. So even when I'm with my lovely assistant who's here today, Hal, I'll say to Hal, I'm living my life out loud. I'm opening my phone and I'm checking my text messages. So like, we have to do this with all of the people in our lives, not just our families. Okay. Oh, here's a whole bunch of reasons I just kind of went through, but this is play-by-play, accountability, building skills. Parents first do this, then kids. If your kids say, you didn't live your life out loud, you give yourself a pat on the back and a gold sticker, because that means it's working and that is a good thing. So if your kids start doing it, great. You can invite them to join you, but do not mandate that they do it. The idea is that you want them to come to it on their own. My teenager occasionally will do it, and I will overemphasize how excited I am that he's doing it, and he loves that because he's 16. Okay, let's talk about dangerous versus scary. What is, okay, wait, do I have this slide? Oh yeah, scary versus dangerous. So a lot of times I hear from parents, I gave my kid a phone because I was worried about them getting kidnapped, or I want to keep them safe. But here's the problem. We know that if you are worrying about kidnapping, we're worrying about something that is statistically nil. In fact, if you wanted your child to be kidnapped, who does? 1 in 7, you would have to leave your child outside on the curb for 750,000 years to be guaranteed to be kidnapped. So that's not a likelihood in any of our lifetimes. And the other metaphor I use for this is this shark versus bathtub. I usually say, like, which one of these is scary and which one of these is dangerous? And now you know where I'm going with this. We think about sharks as like terrifying, right? Like, oh no, this is really scary. And I have to say, I went and did a talk, and there had been a shark attack in the community, and I was absolutely mortified. I didn't find out until after. But, so hopefully that's not the case here. But what happens with shark attacks is we get things like Shark Week on TV, and we get Jaws, and we get, you know, horrible clickbait news headlines that make us think that if we go to the beach, we're all gonna get shark attacked. But the statistical likelihood of dying in a shark attack is like 1 in 10 million or something. It's, again, statistically so unlikely. But your bathtub, something you probably use regularly, 1 in 10,000 chance. A bathtub is far more dangerous than a shark attack, but we don't have bathtub week, right? So I am inviting you to think about worrying about the bathtub and worrying about the phone being in your child's hand than about the kidnapping and the shark attacks. And that is hard. And I am here as a parent to tell you I feel this one big time. We have to work on our own anxiety. We have to recognize that the clickbait gets us too. That we think kidnapping is far more dangerous because we get those horrible stories in our inbox and in our social media feeds. And that kids do not need phones to be safe. Because the irony here is that Pew Research found that the top 3 parenting fears in America are youth mental health, cyberbullying, or bullying, and kidnapping. But I just told you the statistics about kidnapping. And yet, if you give your child a phone to keep them safe from being kidnapped, what happens to 1 and 2? We know those go up with the access to a phone. So this is to me, the data about shark and bathtub. So worry about the bathtub. Okay, well, but don't also worry about the bathtub. Just don't worry about the shark is maybe a better way to put it. And the way I like to phrase this is we don't have a kidnapping crisis in this country. We have a mental health crisis. That's the part we need to be paying attention to. Tech-intentional families make choices within choices. And this is one of those things where if your child is going to use screens, because I get what year it is, this is what I mean. And this is one of my favorite slides, because if you're choosing to do screens or have screens or give them access, make the choices within the choices. A big screen is always better than a little screen. A public space is always better than a private space. No headphones versus headphones. Long form versus short form content. No dopamine snacks, right? We have a family iPad. My daughter would love to tell you it's hers. So that's up for debate. But I will see her going to the Instagram app because Apple ID, my phone, all of this problem, right? And I will say no dopamine snacks. I don't care if you watch a show, because that's 20 minutes of sustained attention versus 20 seconds, right? Those are the choices within choices. Together is better than alone. Paid is better than free. Here's an example, Block Blast, which personally I'm really obsessed with because it's like Tetris, and I loved Tetris when I was younger. Block Blast has pornographic ads pop up in it. It's rated 18 on the App Store. It's a Tetris block game. There's nothing in the game that's bad. The ads are bad. There's an identical game called Color Blast that is I don't know if it's paid or it's the minor version, and it has everything to do with the ads which you're being served. So those are just simple things to pay attention to. The same exact thing may be available, but the rating will tell you what kind of ads are being served on it. Choice-based better than algorithm-based, right? So again, downloading a show versus streaming a show. Go back to the DVD player. I know, I mean, some of us still have them, right? Downloaded better than streaming, I just said that. So choices within choices. You know, bad things happen in small, dark spaces, right? So anytime your kid is taking a device and going into a room and closing the door, we're setting them up for stuff that could happen that we don't want. So again, anytime you can think about that choices within choices, you're helping your children. Tech intentional families put relationships and skills before screens. So example of this is like, you know, my kid needs a phone because they're walking home from school alone. Does your child know how to walk home from school alone without the phone? Because to me, the skill is knowing how to get home, not if I get lost or kidnapped, I can call my mom. So think about what are the life skills, what are the things we want our children to know how to do in the real world, and have them practice those skills before we give them the communication device. And I don't know if I'm gonna say this in a minute, but it feels right now. You don't have to get them a smartphone. And also, I have a thing with Apple Watches, they're just phones on your wrist. Get a flip phone. They have flip phones. They have minimalist phones now. In fact, there's several on the market. I do not endorse any products, but that's a really great middle ground alternative. I do think the pendulum is swinging. I do think kids will think you're the worst parent in the world if you do that, but I always joke, welcome to the club. We are a large membership. So it's okay to be the worst parent in the world in your child's eyes. You're doing it for them. And they're not gonna know that or understand that at 13. Eventually, hopefully, maybe someday. How do we put relationships and skills first? Lots of short conversations, listening more than talking, replacing judgment with curiosity, using phrases like, I notice when you spend time on Roblox, it's very hard for you to turn it off. I wonder if you need help. Or I wonder why that YouTuber is so attractive to you. Like, tell me what makes you want to watch those videos, right? Getting curious about it. Tell me about, what do you like about it? Because if we just come in and yank it out of their hands or we start berating something, we might not like this person they're watching or this game they're playing, but we need to express interest in it and acknowledge it's important to that. I remember the Minecraft days, and I was like, I cannot listen to Minecraft conversations anymore. But I did because my kid cared about it. And then the question was, okay, it's time for the Minecraft stuff to end. As you're putting your tools in the chest, I learned to say, tell me what you're gonna build next time you get to play, right? So you have a transition question there. Remember, you're on the same team as your kid. It's you versus the hijacked neural pathway in persuasive design. It is not you versus your child. And sometimes those side-by-side conversations, like in the car, are the best moments for this, so that's a good place to not have screens if you can. Okay, my daughter and I share my phone. She's 13. This is an interesting experience. Because I work from home, that makes it easier. But she also has a school that has a phone-free policy. So she couldn't bring her phone to school if she wanted to. Because I can say, not allowed, sorry, school doesn't let you, so why would you need a phone at school? We also live a block and a half from school. But thank you, again, to schools that recognize that a phone-free school ban makes parents' jobs easier, and it does. I don't recommend this for everyone, but if you want to try it, if you have a pre-tween or a tween and doesn't have a phone yet, try it and see what happens. And I apologize in advance for group chats. They will destroy you. This is my favorite line that a parent educator taught me. And it is so disarming. And it's this idea of, I forgot to teach you. So I forgot to teach you that when we go to a restaurant, we don't pull our phones out and speak, and not make eye contact with the waiter. I forgot to teach you that when we go to visit your grandparents, we need to put phones away so that we can engage with them because we don't get to visit them very often. Do you hear how different that is than you're at a restaurant, you're being so rude, you pulled your phone out, and I just can't believe how many times I have to tell you. I forgot to teach you is disarming, and it gives you this reset opportunity for both of you. Okay, few final thoughts, start where you are. Are we okay on time? Am I?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Tech-intentional families also build tech-intentional communities. It is so much harder to do this alone. As I keep saying, you're not alone. You told me in the survey data that you are not alone. I mean, you didn't say that, but I'm telling you, you all said the same things. So remembering that you are not alone. You told me this. I've been pleasantly surprised that most of my son's peers have limits on their gaming times. It helped me to establish my own limits. You can ask these questions of other parents. I'm so glad Collegiate doesn't allow devices. That was a really smart move. Again, yay, Collegiate. So you can say to your child's friends' parents, hey, what are your rules about gaming? Or do you guys allow phones and sleepovers? Like, I'm just curious. What are your rules on this? I'm trying to figure it out for myself, right? Asking those questions gets that conversation started. And if we do it non-judgmentally, if we do it with curiosity, that's key. Tech-intentional families are also advocates for tech-intentional technology use at school. This is how I start to sort of see the shift in schools and screens in schools. Parents can request and support bell-to-bell student phone device bans. You already did that. Look, check, done. I would also encourage the school and to parents in general to start asking some good, strong questions about internet-connected one-to-one devices, especially in K-5. And to prioritize skills before screens. So I'm gonna very briefly touch on AI. I don't know what the policy is about AI, but I do know children know about AI. And in fact, I can give you two brief anecdotes. My daughter, a couple weeks ago, I overheard her on the phone, just kidding, it was FaceTime because kids don't call. And she goes, hey, stop using ChatGPT to write your history essay. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? You have ChatGPT on your school-issued computer? And it turns out they do, and I asked the district, we're in a public school in Seattle, and I said, why is ChatGPT available on the students' devices? Because this is K-12, they have him. And the response was, children need access to this transformative technology. And I was like, if by transformative, you mean they're just having it do their homework for them, that's pretty transformative, but I don't see the skill benefit. So I'm having that fight on my own. AI is not ready for prime time. It is problematic in so many ways, and children do not have the brain development skills, the critical thinking skills to understand how and why it is problematic. So adults, we gotta get our stuff together on that, and they should not be using it except in the context of a teacher who understands it, that is talking about what they need to know about it. Does that make sense? Like, teachers can educate about it. That doesn't mean children need to use it to understand why it's good or bad. Okay. Tech-intentional families are first fish, and I will end with this. In a school of fish, and it's called a school, which is just the perfect metaphor for the ending of my talks about school stuff, is they're swimming in the ocean. Like, how does a school of fish know when to change direction? Well, it takes one fish to peel away, but that won't change the whole school. You actually need a second and a third fish to join you. And so tech-intentional families are also first fish, but we need second and third fishes too. So maybe you have a first fish in mind, but you could be a second fish. You could be a third fish that champions the efforts of the first fish. And that will move the school. And not literally, but also literally, right? It can move the community as well. It can help parents be more intentional about screens. And as a reminder, later is better, less is more, relationships and skills first. This is a fight worth having. You are doing this for your children and for their brains. And if you want to learn more, I wrote a book. I do free monthly webinars and I save them all in my video library. I write weekly essays about parenting. I've got a lot of this. And if you like reading essays, you can sign up for my mailing list or look at my blog. And thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be with you. Fine with me.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
I know about the whole the screen time and all this, but do you have any data or any information about 5G and how much even more destructive 5G is?
I know about it, and I don't know enough to speak confidently. I think from an environmental standpoint, I think AI is the one that I'm paying a lot of attention to. Are you talking about from like a health, physical health? Yeah.
The frequency of 5G.
Yeah, I know about it, and I don't feel like I can say enough. Yeah, but I know that it is a concern. So just add it to the list of things to worry about, but not, we're talking bathtub worries, not shark worries. Yes.
So in the dangerous versus scary, I have littler kids, and I always am telling them, no, we can't have Roblox because your Aunt Liz says so.
Yeah.
But the answer, I don't want to be like, it's so scary.
Great question.
How do I, because they're still just
Yeah.
like, well, everyone else has it.
Yeah, great question. Like, how do you teach your kids scary versus, right, you probably don't want to lead with shark attack statistics. So one thing I think with young children is to explain it in the context of persuasive design. This is built to trick you. And I use the word trick with young children a lot because, well, and even middle schoolers hate being tricked, right? So to use the language of the way this, do you notice that like the play next episode on the show you're watching, like you can explain to them it's doing that on purpose. It wants you to play longer. So we try in this family to play games that aren't this, right? Or we try to do things that are in alignment with our values. Is that like kind of articulating it that way? I think the other thing is, and again, I'm not saying you should give in and let them play Roblox. The reality is your kids, it's not really a question of if, it's when. It's not maybe in your home, it's at someone else's home. And that's what I hear all the time. It's like, that's where kids are getting exposure to stuff. So it's actually about kind of helping our children understand to be aware of it before they encounter it, if possible. And I don't believe it's ever too late to have these conversations. Just say like, another one I didn't mention yet is when you see something online that's scary or inappropriate or you don't understand, you can always tell me and I will never be angry at you. That is a really important message for us to land as parents, because if they can't come to tell you, guess where they're gonna go? Google. We don't want them Googling stuff they don't understand or that's scary, right? So really, really hit that home. I'll never be mad at you. And if you don't know what to do, it's okay as parents to say, you saw this and I don't know what to say, so we're gonna close the screen and I'm gonna take some time and think about what I need to say and how I can handle this, but thank you for telling me, right? That goes back to that relationship piece. We want them to come to us. So it's an ongoing conversation. And I would ask them, like, what is it about this game that interests you? What are you hearing your friends like about it? Like, let's talk about, it's okay to express interest and then still say no. That's sometimes, they won't like that. Sorry, kids, that's the reality.
Hi, good morning. So we know that the brain is developing until age 25, right? So I'm going to guess that the majority of the people in this room are over age 25, right?
Yes.
But for our children whose brains are still developing, how does the screen time impact them versus us in terms of their higher level thinking, their cognitive skills,
Great question.
their future academic success?
Yeah.
Because it's different for us because our brains have stopped developing.
We had analog childhoods too. Yeah, this is, actually I forgot to tell you the second anecdote that I was gonna tell you, which was on the flight here from Seattle. I sat next to a college student who was doing her homework, and I could see the college thing, see the title of the course, I could see the questions. You know where this is going. And in her hand was her phone, and ChatGPT was open, and she was typing all the questions directly into ChatGPT. Some of them were multiple choice. I was like, come on, you could guess. But, and then the last one was an essay question, and I was like, oh, come on, please just write the essay yourself, please. Nope, typed it in, got the prompt, set the phone down, and retyped the essay. I found that incredibly upsetting. That is the second flight I've been on in a month where a college-age student was sitting next to me using ChatGPT. Second time, it's not only one time, it was the second time. The fear I have, what I lose sleep over at night is the depletion and the lack of development of things like critical thinking skills, because children are so heavily inundated in an unprecedented way now than they were 5 years ago. COVID, we blame COVID for a lot, but this was on the rise prior. It just was sort of fuel to the fire. And so it is even more important in my mind that we protect that displacement, like that we try to minimize what's being displaced, because we need to give our kids time to build those skills. Because to me, that is a threat to democracy, to raise a future citizenry that lacks the ability to problem solve, work with people they don't disagree with, have empathy, think critically, analyze. So I didn't say this either, but technology education is imperative. Educational technology is not, and there is a difference. Tech ed is what I'm talking about, teaching the skills. The typing, can I tell you how many kids have laptops and don't know how to type? Typing is a skill, research is a skill, and Google cut and paste is not a research method. How do you understand sources? How do you know what's false? How do you know what's a deep fake? That is absolutely critical skill stuff that kids need in the 21st century. They don't need a math program in kindergarten or a reading program. And I will say, the exception to this is students with learning disabilities who need it as a tool. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the widespread adoption globally for this in an education. Did I answer your question? And then a whole bunch more. Yeah. Yeah.
I work in cybersecurity, so I feel like I have a handle on my own household.
Yes.
Do you think that 5 to 10% of the exposure outside of the household is worth trying to control and navigate? Or if you have your household under control or you're setting boundaries, is that enough?
I mean, I know what you probably want me to say. No.
Because it's like an influence. Like,
Yeah.
The sphere of influence is only so strong.
And there's nothing.
Do I need to worry about the 5%, the 10%?
Yes, but you can't cybersecurity the solution. You can parent the solution. And to me, it's you do as much as you can in your house, and not all of us are going to be able to do what you're doing, right? This is cybersecurity side at home. But if you're talking to your kids about, hey, when you see something, you come talk to me. Hey, when you go to your friend's house, I know they don't have limits on games, so can we talk about what kind of games you're going to play? How does it make you feel? Do you want me to talk to the parents? All of that stuff, because what's happened as your kids get older, they're going to differentiate from you more. It's much easier to do all of this when your kids are young. And I always feel like if I could just have all those parents of kids 15 and up who come to me and say, I wish I had known this. I wish I had done this when they were younger, because it is so much harder when they're older. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's harder. Like thinking about the fact that they are going to get farther away from you, spend less time at home. Like, how do you solve for that? It's going to be, in my mind, through the relationship building and conversations that you're going to have to teach them how to handle it. That's my 2 cents.
Can I
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I really loved your analogy of whack-a-mole and like security stuff, because I feel that in my core. But I also have all the conversations. So like these kids, they don't have impulse control. So there's like this line that you have to tread in terms of that. And I don't know, can you talk anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do one-on-one client work, and I have for about 5 years. And in the beginning, I would never have said to a family, you need to go cold turkey. I wouldn't have recommended it. And I am not a licensed mental health professional. I have that disclaimer in my contract. But I have seen enough. There are certain circumstances, so please don't go home and cold turkey everything. Like, this is not my professional recommendation, but like, there are some times where that is the needed solution. And I will recommend Dr. Victoria Dunkley's book, Reset Your Child's Brain. I believe she has a new edition coming out, because that book is about 10 years old. There's, especially for children with executive function challenges, so ADHD in particular, sometimes none is the right path, and it is a hard path. So another person I highly recommend is Mike McLeod at Grow Now ADHD. He's in Pennsylvania, and he has a large Instagram presence. So here is the Screen Time Consultant recommending an Instagram account. But he's excellent. We've done a couple of lives and webinars together. But in my mind, he's one of the few people who really gets the executive function ADHD screen time problem and has some pretty concrete things to do. So I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, you should expect this is an ongoing challenge for the next 10 to 20 years of your parenting life. And I don't mean that like, oh no. I mean like, just be prepared. Like, this is the reality, and there are things you can do. And at the end of the day, preserving your relationship to your child is the most important one. So sometimes that does mean letting go, picking your battles, right? I mean, again, like I said, my son plays video games and I don't love that, but I would rather have the relationship and decide. And again, you know, he does his homework and he does his instruments and we talk about that all the time, but yeah.
So I know we're over time, so
Yes,
sorry
thank you.
everybody.
And I have handouts, I'm gonna grab them while you talk.
But you mentioned the school-based, like,
Yeah.
our personal issue is more about a 15-minute assignment turns into an hour because we're on Pinterest and we're over here and we're over there. And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering, would you recommend, how far up do you go? Do you go to the teacher? Do you go to the middle school? Do you go all the way? Like, how do you navigate starting that conversation? Because you're talking about doing that with with ChatGPT.
And again, I want to honor that you have a great school, and I don't want everyone to come pounding on the door. I think relationships first, so who do you have the best relationship with? And again, replace judgment with curiosity, because it has to be in the context of, just help me understand this. How do we use it? And what I'll find is that, like, here's my teacher skill of counting and passing papers out while talking. Oh, I miscounted. Just kidding, I'm out of practice. You know, different teachers do things differently, you know, and I think there are some teachers who really get this and understand it and limit it and are very intentional about it. And I think there's some teachers that, and I was just talking to a group of teachers yesterday about this, like, there are some younger teachers, especially coming kind of on the tail end of like more digital childhood teen years, that don't necessarily see the problem with it. And so, again, this is no shade to teachers. I feel very protective of the profession. It's under fire. And, you know, and again, teachers and schools are on the same team. It's the ed tech companies that are predatory. It is the ed tech companies that profit from it. And, you know, that's where I really would love to see this as a team effort, you know, is asking these questions, because I always say ed tech is just big tech in a sweater vest. It's the same exact business model, so, yes.
One more question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Could be a really long question. When is this gonna be more regulated? Let me finish. Because, you know, we all look back at the movies in the 50s and 60s, and the beautiful men and women, they're smoking cigarettes, and all of a sudden it dawned on us, you know, you can't smoke while you're pregnant. You know, you drive a car, you need a seatbelt or you're belting the windshield. It seems to me like it's the wild, and I'm guilty. I've got one phone I'm turning in, I've got a new one. You know, I'm guilty as charged like everyone else. But it just seems, do you feel like it will be regulated at some point, especially for minors?
Yeah, I think it's heading that direction, and it's not gonna be a perfect solution, right? I see this like a Jenga tower, you know, a game where we're sort of like pulling the blocks out in all kinds of different places. So like parenting is one piece of that, regulation is another piece, education in school is another piece. I do think it's coming. There's been talk of banning smartphones for under 16. Some countries are already doing this. America sometimes doesn't like government intervention, so, you know, there's that too. COSO is the Kids Online Safety Act. I will tell you that big tech has a lot of money to pay lobbyists to stop bills. So that's another way you can get involved if you're passionate about this and you enjoy that kind of work. You know, write to your senators and your congresspeople and ask them, when are they gonna back this and how are you gonna, you know, push back? They take a lot of money from big tech, and unfortunately makes this all more complicated. So I really appreciate you staying. Thank you again for having me. It's an honor. Is there anything else?
Well, Lindsay Anderson, you just won the Street Time Solution.
Oh, I'm happy to sign it if you would like. Yes.
Johnston, I think it's Robert. It's 290882. Johnston, Robert. Emily's going to have more books to sell on the back table. Sign here if you want to be a part of her mailing list. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.